to have the opportunity to share this year's research. And you know, I had to pinch myself in an interview that I had with MPI this morning, where they said, "How long has Meeting Room of the Future been going on for?" And it feels like, you know, just a few short years, but it was actually 2016. So we're 7 years into the whole concept of Meeting Room of the Future coming about, and 7 years and over 50,000 downloads of the annual research, which I'm thrilled to be able to share with you today. So the next 45 minutes, we can't go through the whole report. So we'll be giving you links to the report in the chat box, and Kate will send it on to you. And also we'll share the highlights of these slides as well, just so that you can focus on them, and you can, you know, you don't need to screenshot. But what I hope that we can cover is the key elements of what is changing the landscape in relation to the landscape of the small to mid-sized conference and meeting venues around the world. And as we come out of the last 2 to 3 years of major disruption, we're seeing some expected, some welcome, but also some unusual changes as well, as we get onto a path of returning to a new environment for live face-to-face digital meetings. So you can see there we'll cover all the main elements as it relates to not only the report, but the way that we're running venues, or the way that we are providing services to the venue. So I know we've got Jason joining us today from Encore Global, and Encore is the largest AV and audiovisual and IT provider in the space of conference centers, not just in the Americas, but around the world. And this environment affects our suppliers as well. So I'm thrilled that our suppliers can join us for these webinars when we run them. So why is IACC well placed in terms of this, you know, putting together this research? Well, we thought this at the beginning, but back in 2016, when this whole initiative came about, we said, well, you know, the one thing that's constant is that IACC seems to be in the center of being connected to a huge group of highly entrepreneurial, experimental, and specialist conference and meeting venues. There are members, of course, but not only that, through collaborations that we've got with the meeting planner community, such as with MPI and other meeting planner associations, and indeed through our members, we've got a pretty good connection to the opinions of the meeting planner world. Take our suppliers like Encore and others, and then meetings industry experts, those gurus that you know everything about their specialist subject. We got Tracy Stuckrath in the top right hand corner of the image here. Nobody knows more about meetings, food and nutrition than Tracy, but others like Mariella McElraith, Corbin Ball. Over the years that IACC has been in this industry and been a thought leader, we've built some really important, powerful connections. So all of those opinions, not just the opinions of IACC and not just the opinions of myself or others on the board, come into the report. And this year's report is a considerable one, some 50, 57, nearly 60 pages of perspective. Now, this year's survey was all about the meeting planner. So we asked their opinion. What are they seeing? What do they want to see in terms of the meetings that they put on in the next 2 to 5 years? So we're really trying to get their perspective, find their pain points, find their levels of, you know, where they're disappointed, but also match those expectations, of course, with the investment that we're going to put into our venues. And even if you're not part of the leadership team that make the decisions on where you invest in the future, you will be, wherever you are in the organization, you'll be well placed to talk about what's important for our attendees, for those that organize meetings, and help you shape what you do. If you're in sales, knowing what's important in the RFP process to highlight if you do it well. Whether you're in food and beverage, knowing how things are changing, and when you put your menu recommendations forward, it doesn't matter where you are in the organization and the venues, or on the supply side, you will be able to use data from this research to help create a better solution. So this year was actually really strong on the meeting planner survey. Next year we'll be surveying the venues, so do please look out for it and get involved. But 275 meeting planners from 5 continents answered this survey, and we asked them specifically that they, can they answer the questions based upon their events of less than 100 attendees. That's really important because many meeting organizers will organize a plethora of meetings, whether they're small meetings for 10 all the way up to meetings for thousands. And we didn't just want them to be generalists, but we really wanted them to hone in. And 86% of the events that or the organizers that we surveyed run meetings of 100 attendees or less. So that was really great that we can be confident that this relates to our world. We're always looking for both geographical and also generational divides. And what I mean by that is when we ask the same question of a meeting planner in Germany as we do in the US and as we do in Australia, we're looking to see if there's any trends that are global versus those which have got a continental difference or have got a generational difference in their perspective. And we'll call those out as we go along. We also asked as well if the venue marketing practices are aligned with buyer priorities. So a bit of a complicated statement, but in essence, if a meeting planner says, this is really important to me when I'm sourcing a venue, and then we ask the same question of the venue the next year, do the venues see it as important as well, or vice versa? Because if they don't, we're not aligned with our priorities. And even if that means that we have to call ourselves out as an industry, then we'll be happy to do that. We feel that's our role. And then last but not least, whether you're working in the corporate world, the association, the government meeting world, it doesn't matter. We've got a good broad spectrum of answers that have come back from those. And in the main report as well, if there are any differences across all those different divides that we look at on the screen here, we'll call those out in the detailed reports or the graphs. So let's have a look at some of the key findings. And the key phrase that I love to bring out at the moment is the biggest thing we've got to remember is it's not your parents' meeting. So whatever it was your parents experienced as conference attendees, as meeting attendees, that's not what meeting planners are looking for at the moment. The more things change, the more they stay the same, in the sense that we've got to be careful, I think, sometimes of being cautious about using the word experiences. We need more experiences in meetings because we've been doing this for a while. We've been identifying that the attendee experience is key, but it absolutely remains at the heart of everything we do. Now, what changes and what experiences we put in, they do differ. But the fact that we've got to continually be thinking about richer and deeper and more different and more surprises for attendees just snowballs. It isn't a trend that was there yesterday and is starting to ebb away, and meeting planners are telling us that. The planners have said categorically that they're looking for larger spaces for attendees to spread out and access outdoors. And of course, that is definitely something that the pandemic has taught us. We're not doing it for hygiene reasons now. We're doing it for health and well-being reasons. We're doing it because that's what we're comfortable with. So if we look to our spaces that are just those ancillary spaces outside of the meeting room spaces, and we've got a lot of them, then are we making the most of that in our RFPs? That's a question to ask, because that's definitely something that people want to see more of. And planners are definitely looking for creative spaces that offer the memory, as opposed to creating them. We often look at hotels and venues to run our meeting. We look at a fairly blank canvas and say, right, what can we do to create a memorable experience for our attendees? Where actually within the IACC community specifically, one of the messages I take into every educational forum is these venues exist, and it's the memory inducing experience is already there, maybe through the aesthetics, through its design, and we'll look at some of those as we move forward. But if all of that's in place, as a standard, then you can invest in the other areas as well, or you can keep your costs down. So I showed you right at the beginning those icons, and we're going to enter the first part of it, which is the research highlights relating to how you fulfill your meeting objectives. So remember, again, this is not the opinion of us as venues, but it's what meeting planners want. And they're looking and thinking about things such as, the millennial attendee, the attendee relationship building throughout the event, venue flexibility, of course, with the cost of travel at the moment as well, location and accessibility. And importantly, there's that word again, creativity. What role can the venue play? Because undoubtedly it has a role to play. One of the questions we asked here was, what is the most important aspects of the meeting in support of meeting your objectives? And you won't be surprised to see education and content and topic being there right at the top. But this is a generation now that's coming in that is programmed for constant stimulation. The format's changing, a lot more interaction, a lot more collaboration and shorter sessions. They're all in place. But look at venue physical characteristics, number 3 in there, even above food and beverage, business connections, and networking, that sort of thing. So it's really interesting to see that the role of the venue now, if you were in this industry 10 years ago, you would never have seen that. So it's great to see that it plays a really pivotal part, and therefore meeting planners should be spending more time finding the absolute right environment for their meetings. A couple more of the highlights. Really, this comes down to the fact that if your meeting format and the program or something you're looking to deliver can be delivered in a digital environment, then it has no place in the live person event. You're really looking to do things that you can't do over Zoom. So again, for us as venues, what is it we're offering that if you were somebody that couldn't attend, or you're live streaming in, that you'd be disappointed that you couldn't participate in? And that's actually something that's a really powerful offer to put into your proposals or offers a solution to your client. We've lived with the word team building for a long time, but actually team building has a lower priority than social networking. And this is the first time we've seen this come about. Before, doing things together as groups used to sit under the umbrella of team building, but actually that word now we feel is becoming a little bit stale. However, the premise of doing team and group things at meetings is definitely not going away. It's facilitated networking is the phrase of the moment. And the fact that it's okay to have fun at a meeting is something that really has cemented itself. One of the other characteristics as well, and again, I don't know if this is something that's going to stick or whether it will ebb away over the next couple of years or so, but groups are looking for more privacy from other groups. So the amount of private dining requests or having private lunches is increasing as opposed to being in communal areas. Again, we're going to watch this space quite hard, long and hard in the future to see if that wanes, but it's definitely there today. So again, if you've got some great creative spaces for dining and private dining, indoors or out, that's really a great attribute that you've got. And I'm sure the demand for private dining is far bigger than you remember back in 2019. Now let us take a little bit of a look at physical venue characteristics. So this is the next section. So this is the bit that really interests all of us on this call today that offer the venue. But the physical venue characteristics include all of these kind of areas. It's not just about what the meeting room looks like, but those social spaces, as we talked about, are sometimes more important and critically evaluated more so than the meeting room itself. The networking capabilities, the bringing the outdoors in, our ability to collaborate on a one-to-one basis are all really important. So what did some of the research say? Well, interestingly, the share of events held at hotels continues to show a downward trend. I find this fascinating. And, on one hand, but actually, as we looked at, that experience, of course, it goes without saying that specialist event venues, urban located inspiring meeting and conference venues, unusual venues, are being used more and more. Now, if you're a traditional hotel, that doesn't mean that you're losing the business, but again, it does mean that your competitor set has grown a bit. If you are not a regular big box hotel and you are offering some of the facilities and services we're talking about today, then it's exciting. Keep doing what you're doing, because the meeting planner community are responding to it. Creative demands are driving the shake-up of the type of venues used. Those with more traditional spaces, historic spaces, etc., may have to be even more creative when it comes to comes to making the best of their spaces. But undoubtedly they can do it, and we've seen groups in the IACC portfolio that have done that incredibly well with venues that you might not have thought it possible. Here's the next element. So, this is the one, if you're sat here thinking about what more can I do for my clients who are arranging meetings, then these are the elements that your meeting professional today are willing to outsource. Reduced lead times are definitely having an impact on what people are willing to outsource. But equally, you look at some of the areas and you think, well, maybe, if event tech is high on the list, then definitely outsourcing that because of the complexity, the impact on the event when it goes wrong, the influence that technology has on it. It's not surprising that as a meeting organizer, you are not going to take responsibility for that and instead need a trusted partner, whether that's the IT and AV team at the venue or a trusted provider who will come in and do that for you. But what's very interested in is in what's the space where it kind of drops off a cliff, and you start to see the fact that less meeting planners are willing to let go of participant registration, which is kind of interesting when you see that event registration, conference and meeting apps, all of these technologies now are highly effective, very easy to implement for even smaller events, and still our meeting planner communities are looking to hold on to those. So we expect that may change as people become more comfortable outsourcing or need to outsource more. Then we look at how the venue elements influence the delegate experience. And I, again, encourage you to look at these stats in relation to your own venue. If the meeting, a venue environment significantly impacts how the delegates interact, learn and communicate, and you've got great meeting spaces, then are you talking about how your spaces impact delegates' ability to learn and communicate, or are you just painting the picture of what the space is? So linking these benefits that meeting planners are pulling out to your actual space in the words that you use and the way you present your spaces is really interesting. But again, the good news is for dedicated, for meetings focused venues where I know the facilities of the IACC members are right at the top of the tree, it's deemed important. 8.8 down to 7.7, nothing is unimportant there. Now, I use these examples, and in fact, I used these examples just a couple of weeks ago at IMEX to call out just maybe a little bit of the generational differences. So in their own right, these rooms are nice, they're bright, they're well designed. But actually the stories behind them are more important. So on the left-hand side, this space here is one where it was developed and exists and was decorated for no other reason other than to have informal hangout space for one-to-one conversations for attendees. It's not a dining room that's been converted. It's not a meeting room. It's actually central to the venue, and it serves no other purpose than to have those small conversations and social environments. So again, that comes back to the importance being matched from the meeting planner perspective. And if you have these sort of spaces it's really worth pointing out. The one on the right was a traditional, I want to say 75 seater tiered lecture theatre auditorium originally. And because of that move away from these tiered facilities to more collaborative style layouts, they've actually converted this into a cinema room and created packages in the evening for that to be taken over by groups to be able to watch inspiring videos or just hang out together with popcorn. It's got, great sound, great lighting for that evening. Again, more importantly, the story behind this is not necessarily that it's a venue with a cinema room now, but it's actually a venue that realizes that delegates and attendees, and particularly those of today's generation, don't want to spend 2-3 hours at the bar. It's just not what they want to do. They want stuff to do at night that keeps them together and stops them going to bed early or going back onto their laptops. And this venue has picked up on that. We picked out 1 or 2 captions and comments in the report, but this one from Mexico is one that I think is a great one to share with the meeting planner community. And they just pointing out they believe people are absolutely tired of the same square, boring rooms. They want the creative spaces. They want to be, or all the people to be part of the activities and not just spectators sitting in a chair. And if you look at the room behind you, this is actually a treehouse of one of our members in the Netherlands. So you're right up there in the trees to climb the stairs to get in, but it's the most creative room that you could run a meeting in. And we've had the pleasure of doing a couple there. Great inspiring spaces where meeting planners really do appreciate it. So how are the meeting spaces that planners are looking for today different from, the pre-pandemic? That's what we're asking and we're really interested in. And you'll see some of the pointers here that this was open text and we had a team of professionals look at it. And the words that kept reoccurring was that we want evolved technology. We need to be outdoors more. Flexibility is important, hybrid's important, and remains important, even if there was a bit of a waning with hybrid as we all of a sudden rushed to get back live. Hybrid still plays a role, and just having more space for attendees, more square footage per attendee is what we're being evaluated against when venues are being considered next to each other. So we move a little bit now into the glue that really does help create an incredible event and a memorable event, and that's the culinary and beverage trends. And it's not just the food that we serve, but it's everything to do with, creating joy, creating surprise, health, well-being, but then also the role that we have on the planet as well through climate change and sustainability. It's such a rich way of touching so many senses. There's definitely a real interest in having the shared refreshment breaks. So this is different to private dining, but having refreshment breaks that are running continuously throughout the day, are well stocked, are using regional foods as opposed to prepackaged foods, and also caring for the environment. It's hard to read all of the signs on the wall here, but this venue has definitely really embraced a sustainability message, a fair trade message, the types of cups, equipment they're using, the no bottled water, it's all rolling through. So it's really interesting to see, how these areas are evolving, but, linked as well to that whole flexibility piece. And maybe a little bit more of a reason why meeting planners are tending to move more away from the hotels that can only offer, the pump flasks, the fixed tea and coffee at a fixed time. Lots of information on this slide here, but the ones to pick up on in terms of, the key finding is it's all about food and beverage that supports conversation. And, 43% consider the venue's food and beverage credentials when sourcing. That's increasing constantly. And get nearly 90% have confidence that the venue, if given the dietary requirements, they're being dealt with. Now, I won't get into how we manage the increasing list of dietary requirements we get for attendees. That's more of a technology and a sort of question that we will go into. But certainly when we look at the venues planning, side of things, inflexible and unhealthy with lack of options is still the biggest challenge that our meeting planner community have when they're booking their meetings. So the venue, when it comes to dealing with it, with those requests, it is pushing back. Now, as we've come out of the pandemic, we've reduced the number of menus, the number of menu options, the number of staff. It's harder to bring staff together. So undoubtedly, dealing with last minute requests is a lot harder than it was in 2019. We can't just drop or find 6 people to change a service style 24 hours earlier. So we understand that. And we're looking to educate meeting planners with that as well to a degree. But by equal measure, look at what your competitors are doing. And if they're really inflexible because they've struggled to hire again, they've struggled to get the knowledge back in, use that as one of your advantages when you're talking to customers, because not every IACC venue is going through the same hiring challenges that the hotel down the road or the venue down the road is having. Now, remember, as well as a lot of our those that we researched and filled out the survey are from North America. It's great to see as well that 72% are saying that menus should become healthier in the future. And, although we're on a journey and sometimes we move a little bit too fast, I think generally speaking, the momentum is really getting there now, where health and well-being is at the heart of our menu choices, as opposed to on the periphery now. So that's great to see as well. Preferences for the future of break and mealtime formats. They do want healthier food and beverage options. That's right up there. Creative food stations as part of the overall experience creation. Again, that's something that doesn't surprise us. But again, we're just seeing coming a little bit further down here that more frequent, shorter breaks is not so important at the moment. Longer breaks and or meal times, not so big at the moment either. I'm not saying that they're going away. I'm just saying that the others are taking a priority over them. But as you can see, not many people feel that no change is needed in the future. So a lot to cover there in terms of food and beverage, and it does, form quite a big part of the trends because everything is changing in this space. But now I'm going to move into the technology side of things. And this really is everything from, the audio visual that we provide. That's more obvious in our meeting room spaces, but it's bigger than that. It's the environment, the infrastructure that we create the moment that an attendee walks through the door, or even out of the back door and into the outdoor spaces that we're operating in now more and more as well. It doesn't stop there. The data that's coming in, the cybersecurity elements of it. A lot of you have, heard about, the breaches in some conferences, political conferences. The current one that's just been resolved in Las Vegas, where a number of the hotels were cyber hacked and held by ransom for returning their operating systems, which costs tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. So let's take a look at that. Some of the key things on the technology questions, again, lots of information in the main report, but AI is still, AI has featured for the first time, and it's still a very low figure. However, we expect that to increase. Now, if any of you are interested in AI, I certainly am, from a position of ignorance. So I'm getting to learn as much as I possibly can at the moment. I'm starting to use AI to create conference text, promotions, social media streams, etc. But the AI is certainly going to be a feature in terms of the meeting planner journey and the attendee journey as it comes to business events. So just encourage you to watch that, learn as much as you can in the coming years, because it will become a staple of the organizing as well as the attendee experience. We asked specifically meeting professionals to give us some comments around what causes you the biggest headaches, and they really are least comfortable with the failure rates that they're seeing in live streaming for hybrid and virtual events. And this is a fact that we've got to keep in mind now, that it's not that there are live meetings, hybrid meetings, or virtual meetings. There are now digitally charged live meetings. That's all it is. It's a live meeting, but it's got a virtual and hybrid element to it. And so that's really important to bear in mind. But where meeting professionals get the most nervous is around the failures there. So again, that may be why they're happy to outsource it, but more importantly, why they actually consider outsourcing it an investment for the future. You've got this all coupled with the fact that we're also getting more comfortable with adding it to our events as organizers. And therefore, I remember when hybrid, streaming of certain sessions at a conference required you to make that decision a year before the conference took place, so you could budget for it and make things happen. Now our meeting planners are not afraid to turn around to the venue and say, we want to bring 8 people in from Denmark tomorrow afternoon. Just like ordering a TV screen or a flip chart pad, that immediacy. And we've heard that from venues as well, that they're seeing very short notice requests for that. If you can deal with those short notice requests successfully, that's an attribute, and that's something that you really should be shouting about. And then we've got areas like the high levels of implementation, the live audience participation capabilities. As you look at that interactive technology, that collaboration is starting to drop down, maybe because, again, we've been used to too much technology over the last 3-4 years, that we really are pushing back against it. So we'll watch this space in terms of, systems like Slido and others. Linked to our sustainability message, the whole digital signage piece is really important. So I've been in environments, this is IACC in Toronto, actually in 2019, and Encore brought what was then part of their research and development suite, the pop-up screens. So we used to have, pop-up banners where we had printed the sessions, and now these are on digital screens that we can amend in a second. And they're becoming really popular because they can get taken away, used, reused. Nothing is printed, nothing is thrown away. But even as you relate to those screens that are situated around a venue, they're really valuable as we move away from printed conference materials, or actually move completely away from printed conference materials now. And it's just worth noting that I've been, and we've run events in the past where, we've maybe had to have more than one conversation about having access to those screens because they were carrying hotel information, or they were carrying a TV channel or something like that. So just realizing that it's a really powerful tool for your client and for your meeting planner. Dedicate as much of that bandwidth and those screens to them as you possibly can. Now, respondents from the Americas were least likely to use what we call two-way streaming, and more likely not to use any streaming at all when asked about the primary types of screening at events. But certainly the biggest one in there is a two-way streaming, where the audience can communicate actively with the live speakers and the audience. But not a long way behind that is one-way streaming. So it still has a role, and that's for the attendee to have a connection to the event, but probably so as a shop window to coming to the event live the next year. That's something to very much keep in mind. And this was my point earlier. So I've already touched upon this, which is the ability to be able to provide on-the-day requests for virtual streaming. Let's just remember, this is not, this is not just IACC believing that this is, something that's important. This is what meeting planners are telling us. Now I'm going to move into, it is an element of technology, but it's one that, if for any of you here that are on the sales side of the organization, or indeed on the technology side, and are thinking about this in relation to how you present the property digitally. So the adage is always, in person is better. So come and have a look at the venue, meet with the team, have a walk around and get a feel for it. But we're actually, moving more and more away from that. So being able to evaluate a property on site, rather virtually, is an important element. However, in person remains popular for smaller groups, and this of course is the environment in which IACC operates in, that smaller group. So there you see 37% doing an in-person inspection regardless of size. If your meeting organizer is situated some way away or even in a different country, then the ability to use tools like All Seated as an example, which provide not only the diagramming and the live ability to be able to change a room setup and look at it from a VR perspective, is really important. But you can now also use those platforms with an embedded video conference tool. So just like we can communicate on camera here, you're doing it in a live virtual room as well with not virtual reality, with augmented reality. So technology is really helping facilitate the remote evaluation of venues. Touched upon the beginning on situations like Las Vegas, and so it's not unusual for cybersecurity to become, in the eyes of our clients, a bigger priority in the next 3 to 5 years, being a part of the consideration of what makes for a acceptable venue or a non-acceptable one. And often it is the afterthought or something that is looked at after the contract's signed. Here we've got 4.2, 4.3 this year, saying that they have a cybersecurity brief that they share with the venue and contractors. It's really worth knowing, how robust your infrastructure and system is. And then the last part that I'm happy to share with everyone today is the ethical and sustainable venue sourcing side of things. So it still remains important. When we look to the Americas, some of the key findings, 61% are saying that accessibility is really important, that they're really focusing on it at the moment. In the Americas, surprisingly, climate is ranked the least important, where it is the most important in the rest of the world. Now, that doesn't say that one is right and one is wrong, but what it will say is that depending on where your attendees come from or where your meeting planner resides, that may have an influence on how they feel, or which one, whether they rate accessibility higher or whether they rate climate higher. And sometimes it might just be down to the fact that they're putting climate further down the list, because they feel that they've achieved what they need to, or the venue they're going to is incredibly sustainable because it's done all of the work. So that sometimes has an element to it. Venues are now seeing more and more requests for carbon measurement from the venue. So 19%, that is steadily increasing. If you still can't provide a carbon footprint measurement for a meeting that your client comes to you for, then you could be in a tricky spot, because they could well be assessing you based upon that. So now I'm going to open up to questions, but just before I do, some of the key considerations this year, and there are many more in the main report, is, we're adapting to higher costs. Some items may be off the menu. They will return, a supply chains return and prices come back, but you are seeing restricted menus. Staff shortages and automation are definitely aligned with each other. So we're seeing really positive steps in terms of automating the things that don't require a personal touch. Some of those are linked to the fact that we're still rebuilding our teams. Higher quality internet is critical, and the bar just keeps rising there. And collaborative meetings and dining spaces will be the first that our clients will book over an event or venue that that doesn't work for them. So somehow, bizarrely, without me looking at the clock, I managed to do exactly 45 minutes, which means I might have done this once or twice before. But I'm happy for people to jump back online and show your smiley faces. And with that, any questions that anyone may have, happy to address those. But yeah, welcome back to the room, everyone. Thank you for your time. Hi, Chris. Hello, Al. Welcome back.
Hey, Mark, I just have a quick question for you. I guess, from my background of kind of teaching students the ways of event planning, we're doing a lot of work right now with getting the concept of hybrid across to them. Are you finding from the meeting planner perspective, is that growing? Is it kind of stagnant? Is it going back to we just want to have people present face to face? What are you sensing from your perspective on how that flow is kind of working from a hybrid perspective?
It's really interesting. And if you go back over the various stages of returning back to live, it's been a little bit like this. At any one moment, you can draw an opinion on it. My personal opinion now, having seen it and hearing a lot of people talking about it, is that the ability to come in to have hybrid is going to be really important alongside the ability to be live as well. So it is not going to overtake it. But if all else fails and you cannot be there, or if for business reasons you're bringing a leader in or a speaker in, etc., virtually, and it's going to mean that you get that person involved or people where there's no other way of doing it, then they will be in there. So I don't think it's it's a symptom of preferring to do it one way or the other. I think the dynamics of live business events now and into the future will mean that we're opening the window up to people to attend in whatever way they can on that day. And to be able to do it both ways is definitely richer than not. So I'd say hybrid is here, but I'm going to open up to Jason because we've got someone on the call here who represents one of the biggest streaming and hybrid and digital conference providers on this planet. So what do you think, Jason?
So I'm not on that side of the business, but I do have a perspective based largely on conversations I've had with, ironically, the college and university market. There's a little bit of virtual fatigue, which is interesting because we've really only been actively doing that for 3 or 4 years, where we've been meeting in person for much longer. If you think about everybody sitting at their home doing this 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times a day, it seems like, there's this virtual fatigue. And so while there's this acknowledgement that we need to have a virtual component, because it's got to be there, there's a lot of desire to see if we can do virtual differently. I'll give you an example of what differently looks like. And this isn't intended to be a shameless plug, but just as an example. The use of holograms is something we're working with now. So for example, you have your president of the organization that can't make the meeting. And so yesterday they might have done a live Zoom from his office welcoming the attendees of the meeting. But instead we'll build a hologram like that person is standing on the stage. So delivering the same content, but in a more creative fashion. So I don't know if I answered your question, but the need for hybrid remains, but there's a strong desire to do hybrid differently. And there's not a lot of ways to do it differently, but we're trying to find creative ways to do that. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I find it interesting. I think one thing that really resonated with me was the fact that you have hybrid events, but you need to put focus into the hybrid aspect of it to make sure that next year they want to be live, which I thought was really interesting. And that's something that we got to wrap our heads around, as to how we're going to do that in a professional way, but still at the same time, leave them kind of wanting more. It's an interesting concept.
Yeah, that fear of missing out definitely has a role, particularly in a meeting that is an association meeting, a non-profit, where, their revenue for the for the organization comes from the attendee coming. Now, that's quite different for an organization where actually they want to disseminate information. And if they can do that to that employee without them getting on an airplane, then possibly they don't have the same motivations that association will have in that regard. But yeah, I try to stop using the word hybrid nowadays and just use the word digitally live, because if you're a hologram and you're looking on the stage, it feels like the person's there to a degree. They're digitally live as opposed to in person, and then the sort of stigmas around hybrid fall away a little bit.
I have digitally live written down, so duly noted.
Well, I'm looking forward to joining your class. We'll do this all over again on Monday, right, Al, with your class. And it's great that you're exposing, the incoming generation of meeting planners and venue operators to these sort of conversations. So thank you, sir.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks to you.
Mark, I have one question and one comment.
Sure.
I'll try to be quick here. So the comment is I find it interesting, the need to have a digital portion of the event, to be able to do it on demand. So last minute, 8 people from Europe want to participate, and then layer on the cybersecurity or the network security component.
Yeah.
For some venues, the ability to be able to do that comes from a significant upgrade to their network infrastructure at the facility, which many of them find the need to be able to liquidate the cost of that upgrade through charging for it. And it seems to me that it's a little bit of a juxtaposition. There's this need for a reduced or potentially free internet service, but this increased expectation of its, network security and flexibility. And that's just an interesting observation that they seem to butt heads a little bit. I totally understand it from the planner perspective, but that's maybe one of the tougher things in the industry to solve from a technology perspective, is how do you have this really robust network and be able to offer it, pennies on dollar free. So that was more of the comment. The question is unrelated to that is, do any part of the survey findings address meeting planners' desires to partner with either venues or providers that have certain diversity, equity, inclusion commitments? They want to align themselves with providers that have a certain investment in those things. So is there any findings related to that?
There are findings in general, whether that plays a role in terms of the services that you're buying. And whilst we ask for that on a venue basis specifically, you've got to assume that the suppliers that are supporting the whole event outside of the venue will be evaluated, by the same measure. So I would definitely take a look at the research, Jason, and I would draw parallels between what they're saying the expectation is on the venue side, that they have those credentials are going to be similar. For why wouldn't they? It's linked to their corporate culture. If I can go back to the point you made before, I absolutely agree with you. And one of the reasons why those challenges come about is because of the lack of transparency or understanding at the beginning of contracting with a venue, of what the expectations are there. So when you have a salesperson at a venue that says, yeah, this is great, we have 500 meg of download speed, we never had any issues with our clients, 500 people in this room, and they've all used collaboration tool and Wi-Fi without a problem. That's not good enough sort of assessment of a venue's capability for some of those meetings that require the security, the higher security, the higher bandwidth, the holograms coming in. So I'd say actually there's a role that both play in terms of avoiding getting to that challenge and misperception of there is a cost to do something later down the line, and that is to really make sure with both parties an understanding of what needs to be provided. And yes, to a certain degree, most common meetings, the internet infrastructure should be able to do most normal things, should be able to do that with a good meeting venue without an additional charge. It should be built into its packages, built into its infrastructure. We don't pay more for hot running water, do we, when we get to a hotel? But there comes a point where the requirements go above that, and it's identifying those and addressing them and pricing them and giving confidence and assurance that you can deliver. And that's where it takes away that anxiety nearer the time. But great point and great question. Thank you. Any other questions at all? No? On that note then, Kate, I think I'll hand back to you to close off, and thank you everyone for joining me.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. As Mark said, I will forward you all the reports and the call recording from today. And just a reminder to keep an eye on the lineup page on the website. We've got a couple more coming up before the end of the year. So take a look at those and get registered, but I'll include them in the email as well for you tomorrow. So thanks for joining, everybody. Have a good rest of your day and see you soon.